Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lighthouse sessions. Today, I'm really excited. I have my friend Monica. Monica and I were clearly separated at birth or from a past life or something. I get her, she gets me. We are going to have fun. So, Monica, welcome to the show. Tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. So I'm Monica. I live in Sweden, and I work with visionary leaders that do big things in the world. Did I mention that I don't do boring? Uh,
Yes.
and I'm absolutely fascinated by human beings and what is possible. So I have a thing for doing things on what I call easy mode, which is when you really operate from purpose and passion and do the focus on the things that are really easy for you, um because we've been so conditioned to think that hard work and hustle and grind is the thing,
Yeah.
instead of tapping into the genius and the core of who we really are. So that's what I love doing with my clients.
I love that, and there's a few paths I think we'll take. But one of the things I want to pull out of that is number one, you said we don't do boring well, but I think that I meet a lot of people, and there's a lot of noise right now about that hustle culture, where being busy is in itself a badge of honor, and I'm annoying a few people lately because when they start telling me how busy they are, I ask them what is causing that, and they blame external things, and I'm like, I feel you need to look in the mirror a little bit. So I'm going to ask you a really hard question. In your experience, why do especially entrepreneurs take the hard way by default when we can actually make significantly more progress if we find our easy way?
Well, the hard way wasn't default, but it's conditioning, right? We are, I just talked about this a few weeks ago on another podcast, the whole human domestication, right? We are conditioned into a system that wants us to perform within a certain framework, right? And the conditioning of that starts really early, and we get points for working hard. And I also believe that a lot of us entrepreneurs struggle to fit in. I hear this story over and over and over again, um, being punished for doing something really quickly, really well, right?
Yeah.
Like I even I had a client who had this story that was really running his system. He was given an assignment, like the whole class was given this assignment, and he delivered this work that was excellent, and he was graded like the best grade you could have.
Yeah.
And then the teacher said, "Wait, how much time did you spend doing this?" And he was honest.
Yep. First mistake.
Yes. Like, it's a horrible thing, right? It's a mistake, to be honest. But then she changed the grade to a lower grade, right?
Yeah.
So it's really conditioned into us that we need to work hard. And when you get that conditioning really early on in life, we continue. We don't question it, right? Because it becomes a subconscious pattern, and we never question it because it's not a cognitive thought. It's just a habit that this is how we perform, right? And we get
Yeah.
rewarded over and over and over and over again for hard work, right? And then we start doing the things that are hard, not the things that we're good at or that comes naturally to us because we were never maybe rewarded for them.
Well, and when you and I first met, I think we kind of touched on this, that a lot of the trauma points that as adults have shaped us, it's misapplied beliefs about our gifts. As an example, I would get criticized for not showing my work, and it is funny because my kids today, the teacher's like, "You need to show your work," and I'm like, "But they know the answer." And the teacher's response is, well, we need to know they're not cheating. And I'm like, put them in a separate room. I don't care. They know the stuff. But all of these little shiny moments as young kids, people criticize us because, and you know, I grew up in a hard work is its own reward environment. You know, if something comes easy, you don't, it wasn't earned, blah, blah, blah. Like as a society, we tend to focus too much on the input, which is the time and the effort, not on the caliber of the output.
Yeah. And I remember, yeah, I always, when we have this conversation, I have this conversation a lot with my clients. And, you know, I have this saying, I go, well, you know, your parents were not slackers. And everyone goes, yeah, they were really hardworking. I had one client who told me, well, my parents actually were. Right? But most of us have or had parents, grew up with parents that were really hardworking. They would pride themselves in working hard. We would get rewarded for doing things that were difficult, boring, hard, because that was how they were raised. It was how their parents were raised. Like my parents, when I listen to my parents, like the biggest compliment they can give someone is, oh, you know, they're so hardworking people. And now they get a gold star, you know, in like when they
Yeah.
talk about it, right? So and hustle and grind and hard work has its place, right? And there's a value to teaching our children to work hard. But it's not how we should operate our entire life for everything.
Well, and I can add to that because again, my childhood was all about the effort, the effort. You know, the harder you worked, nobody recognized when you got straight A's, but you know, if you showed how hard you're working to earn those A's, then the reward came out. But one of the things I find, and if you go back in time, we used to be thinkers. You know, the if you go back to the ancient Romans and the Grecian times, they sat around and thought. And I
Mhm.
think that's where today it's do. We're always human doing, not human being. And I find it can get really addictive to, well, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. And between you and me, COVID was a wonderful thing in our household because we all took a big pause and we couldn't leave the house. So we spent more time reading, talking. I think a lot of people miss the time with themselves to really ponder. And it's funny, but the harder I work, the less I accomplish. Whereas when I pause and I reflect, that's when I look at something and go, oh, I took the hard road, didn't I? And I've literally, believe it or not, I've trained my chat GPT when I'm grind, it tells me to stop and recenter because if I'm pushing too hard, I'm not open to the universe and my gifts. I'm just focused on get this done.
Several things in what you said. So first of all, the old Greeks whose name we know, they sat around thinking.
Oh, and
Yeah.
talking about thinking for the record.
But that's not how the average person 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago spent their time, right? So we live in an unprecedented time where we actually do have the space, the time, we have the technology. We are not digging ditches to survive, right? My grandparents, my great grandparents, okay, they did have time to sit and think, but they didn't have the luxury of information that we have. And it was hard work to survive. They needed to work hard to survive, right? And it becomes this conditioning that also, I believe, have a bit of an epigenetic effect, right? That is so conditioned into our system. But yes, there is a time, there is a place, there is now opportunity. And I agree with you. COVID created a space where that could happen, that wasn't as easy to access before.
I love that. And I think we've lost that again with instant access to social media. We've always got distractions. I'm not exaggerating. My wife and I went out to a restaurant last week, and we were the only ones in the restaurant not on our phones. And there was one that really, really shocked me, Monica. It was this table of young ladies. They looked like they were about 20-ish years old. And every single one of them was sitting there like this, their phone in front of them. And they were tick, tick, tick. And the weirdest part was one of the five was actually, she had her phone on speaker and she was actually talking to somebody not there.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I was like, why did you come together to ignore one another?
Yeah, but they are addictive. They're designed to be addictive.
Yeah. And that's in our house, we have Sundays are tech free. And it's as much for me and my wife as it is for our kids, because it's amazing just unplugging for one day, how much calmer things get.
Yeah. And the
So,
space
so
for
let
introception. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about your work and what people, how does somebody know what's going on in their head? What's the conversation they're having where they should be talking to you? What are some of the sort of symptoms or pain that they're going through?
So this is why I have a word of mouth business, because we don't usually catch ourselves when we are in need of the work that I provide, right? Because we are so conditioned to put on that brave face and push through and double down and try harder to try harder, right? So I get most of my clients from people that work with the same type of clients that I work with. And here's what I ask them to look for, right? It's when you see someone that you know their capacity, you know how big they're going, you know that they have big visions, they can do a lot of stuff, they are successful, but then there's something that doesn't add up, right? Like the whole, you mentioned, my calendar is so full, right? Or saying things that sounds like logic but doesn't really add up. And so I need people like my referral partners are other coaches, like leadership coaches or financial advisors, or people that see these people up close and can recognize that, okay, there's more work to do on a deeper and higher level. Because here's the thing, the work that I do, most people will never do it. Like 99% of the people on this planet will never do the work that I provide for my clients. But the people that really need it are the people that build tall, go big, see far. Because if that's who you are, you need to have as little, as much as alignment as possible and as little luggage as possible. And that's what we fix. So I don't do mindset work.
I
I
was about
do.
to ask you on mindset because I think we talked about that.
Yeah, well, you had a one experience of my work, right? And so here's the thing, the mind is a processor, and it's the brain. We give too much credit to the brain. The brain, it is blind, it is deaf. It needs input. Yeah. Where does the input come from? Well, it comes from the nervous system, and it needs clean data. So if the input is compromised, decision making, being a visionary, seeing where to go becomes really hard, right? Not getting triggered, because it's a very demanding position they're in. So they need clean data coming in. So rewiring the nervous system, bringing out a lot of that conditioning that we started with, right? You have to work hard, you have to follow the template, you have to follow the rules, because there's a level of success, there's a level of accomplishment, there's a level of productivity where following the rules doesn't apply anymore. You
Well,
have to start.
and if you're going to build tall and create the things that shape history, not advocating for breaking rules, but you need to rewrite the rules for sure.
Yeah, because that's what progress means, right? I hate like I have a visceral reaction when it made it so hard to be in a job, right? When people say, well, that's how it's always been done. And that's the reason we do it like that, because that's how we've always done it. And for me, that's like, oh, now we really need to stop and think.
Yep.
So those are the people I love working with that have that same reaction, right? Something needs to change. This is how we move forward. And now there is no template to follow. So you need solidity in yourself. You need to know who you are. You need to know your purpose. And purpose is not what you do, it's how you show up. And so many of us have learned how to have been forced, more or less, to dim and hide
Yeah.
what they really are and portray something else. But that, like that mask, that persona that you're showing to the world, that cannot bring the progress and the evolution that you're trying to create.
Well, it's funny because I often use the analogy of entrepreneurs. We are like of the old days. We step into the arena, we're the gladiators. We put the mask on, and we go out and we battle to the death every day. In defense of our ideas, our business, and we do it while people sit up in the stands and critique us, and then we go back in and we nurse our wounds, and the next day we do it all over again. And sometimes we need to flip that script, because if we're not doing what we're meant to do, every day becomes a battle. Whereas once we see what we're meant to do, then we can set ourselves free. And it is amazing, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs who get so many layers of mask on, they forget who they are.
Yeah.
And I'll just share, I know you and I have talked about mindset before. We're going to go deeper into the nervous system. I got to the point where I lived exclusively in my head. I was disconnected from everything. And that's not really living, it's surviving, because you're not tapping into everything. And again, it's little things where people said you were too much, you were too this, you were too that. And we learned to hide our gifts from the world. And when we have this story that things are hard, we're putting our little avatar out in the world and letting it do the work. Whereas we're not coming out and shining in our full glory because of, sadly, our computers are broken because it's based on flawed input from when we were tiny, when honestly we didn't have the intellectual capacity to actually evaluate our beliefs and go, yeah, okay. And most people heard I'm a bad boy or I'm a bad girl or whatever it was, not stop getting up in class and shouting. It's the messages were over exaggerated. And then we get to spend the rest of our life flogging ourselves for perceived flaws when we were a kid, which was just our brilliance trying to shine. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an experience we all share, right? Um, so, but it's not something we have to live with, right? And our parents, our families, they wanted us to be who they wanted us to be. with the, you know, the abilities and the capacity that they had. But it's my responsibility now to choose as a completely grown-up person who I want to be, right? It's like at some point in your life, it becomes kind of ridiculous to continue blaming parents, society. Now there is the whole thing that you and I have also talked about, radical responsibility, and it's not easy. But it needs to happen if you are supposed to live, or if you want to live, make a choice to live the life that you want to live, and create what you see that you can create and what needs to happen. Taking responsibility for changing the programming, changing the conditioning, that's on us, right? What happened, happened. Now we need to shift.
I love that, and radical responsibility is a fun topic because I think a lot of people see it as harsh and negative. But um, I'll share my insight, and I want to hear yours. But my aha moment was a lot of people said, "Oh, you got to do the inner work, you got to do the shadow work, you got to figure out yourself." And when I started doing that work, at first I resisted because it was shouldering my blame for my choices. And I'll be honest, my first response to that was, screw you. It was very painful. But then I went through a moment and I went, wait a minute. If I accept that who I am today is a result of my choices, not what happened to me, but how I chose to believe in them or see those stories, I'm incredibly free because now I can choose better going forward. And it went from, I think a lot of people get stuck in the victim mode, or they get into the warrior mode and they're going to fight everybody who came after them. But for me, I see it as it's now this sage mode where I can take responsibility. Again, I can't choose the things that happen to me, but I can look at the things that happened and choose my response to that. And I think that's a nervous system thing where you've got the stimulus and the response, and in that microsecond you've got a choice of what happens. And I personally believe if we train our nervous systems to do that, and I'm not into the science, I can't tell you what triggers and flares and whatever, but I do know that when we choose to see things as happening for us, it's a very different mindset than things happening to us.
Yeah, and also there's a difference between thinking with a cognitive mind and the experience in the nervous system. So there are multiple layers to this, and I think that's one of the struggles if we try to do it from the cognitive mind, because the cognitive mind cannot easily understand what's under the cognition, right? And that's where, like, for me, working with, it's why I choose to work with entrepreneurs, with visionary leaders, because we need to take a deeper and bigger responsibility for our own growth, right? Because this is not the work that everyone will do.
No.
And it's easy to say, oh, you didn't do your work, right? Well, that's not my business.
Yeah.
My business is my work. Do I choose to do my work? And the clients that come to me, right, there's choosing the life you want to live means there's a higher level of risk because you're breaking the mold, right? So we need to work nervous system wise on safety, the experienced safety, because there's a huge difference between actual risk and perceived risk. So we need to lower, that's this nervous system work. We lower the perceived risk. Now the actual risk feel smaller, right?
Yeah.
And then we have the emotional layer. Am I too much? Am I too little? Am I never enough? All of that stuff. That's emotional work. Also not in the brain. And owning, right? That, yeah, I'm a lot. Right? And now when people come to you and say, hey, you're too much. Yeah, I know. I'm a lot. Right?
Yep.
I know I'm a lot. And I heard this
I warn
wonderful,
people of that.
yeah, I heard this wonderful quote the other day. It said, it's not that people want to slow you down. They're trying not to drown.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
that's their experience, right? So I need to own who I am, and I need to honor their experience. I don't have to live by their experience, but it's their experience, right? And then it's the sense of self, right? This is what I want to do. This is my purpose. And this is my choice.
Well,
And I go and say, like, it's not what I have to do. It's not my destiny. It's my choice. I choose to do this. And going out and doing something different and say, I choose this. It's also, it can be provocative. It can be triggering for others. But the more work we do on our own nervous system, the less triggered we get by other people's triggers.
I love
Because
that. Before I
yeah.
did the work, Monica, I used to always ask, how can I help people around me? What resources can I give them? And it was always, how do I help them? And then when people kept saying, well, if you do the work, that will help them. And I'm like, I don't understand. But now that I've done the work, I'm not as triggered by things. And, it's funny because you recognize when others get triggered. And by the way, I'm a neurodiverse, and literally, I think one of my reasons for being put on this earth was to find people's buttons and push them, because I tend to trigger a lot of people. So I'm going to be sending people your way. But and my wife's like, you really trigger people. And I'm like, it's not that I do it on purpose. It's just I'm curious. And if somebody says they're passionate about something, I want to know why. And sometimes when you're probing passion, you find the pain that triggered the passion. But the aha moment was, and this was my moment where I said, this is the work I'm going to do. A friend of mine said that pain and trauma is generational, and it gets passed down from generation to generation until one generation is willing to do the work and go through the pain. Otherwise, we pass it on to our kids. And my reaction there was, hell no, that's not happening. I am going to stop it now. And it was uncomfortable. I'm going to be honest. I did not enjoy the shadow work and going into the darkness and finding the pieces, but now that it's done, and I say done as in I've done it once and I can keep doing it, I'm just magically seeing people around me far less triggered because I'm softening the way I show up, and not in a masking way, but in a genuinely, I'm curious, why is this happening for you? But I'm also seeing it in my kids. They're happier and more laid back because I've done the work. So to me, this is not a question of should I do the work. It's okay, when am I going to start, and how much pain am I going to have to walk through? But to quote Winston Churchill, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah. And it's, as you say, it does have like ripple effects. When you don't get triggered, it's really difficult for someone else to keep the triggering going, because we feed off of each other, right?
Yeah.
So we need that kick or that negative energy to keep getting triggered. And that's one of the things that I love doing with the tools that I have. Say you have this happens in the C-suite room all the time. You have the CEO, that's the the visionary, the guy that loves inspiring others, and he comes into the C-suite room with a new idea, and he's going, "This is how we're going to do it. Now right?" And then you have head of HR or head of finance going like, "That is not our goals. This is not in the spreadsheet," right? And they go boom. If we can take one of those people and shift them, the entire dynamic in the room shifts. And that's one of those things that I can do behind the curtain, right? Take the one person that is open enough to do that work, shift that person, and the entire room changes. And the dynamic now is different and focuses on solution, on progress, and not winning over each other.
Well, I'm going to pull out an example, and you don't have to comment on the human, but Elon Musk has very famously said that empathy is a complete waste of time. And he's acknowledged that he is very autistic. And I think, again, a lot of public criticism of him is his abilities as a leader. But what I look at him is he's an inventor, not necessarily meant to be a leader. And it's interesting because I doubt that he's ever going to need to do the work because he's got enough money. And, I would argue from a business point of view, he's got all the success that most entrepreneurs can imagine. But he's got this wake of really, literally, there's an angry mob with pitchforks and torches chasing him all the time. If he was less triggerable, the impact that he's, rather than resisting him, the world would just say, okay, let's go. But again, not saying Elon Musk needs to do the work. I'm just saying that if you're a leader and you don't do the work, there's a lot of friction that you're going to experience, and it's going to give you more and more opportunities to deal with triggered people, right?
Mm-hmm. And this is, when you have two almost parallel lines, and it looks as if they're exactly right.
Yeah.
But then the further you go, the bigger and bigger and bigger the distance becomes, right? And that's one of the challenging things about success and power and leadership, is that what is a kind of minor thing at a lower level becomes a bigger thing the more you grow. And I have a background in construction. And I wish I could say that every visionary leader, that every CEO, that every entrepreneur was as solid built and straight and aligned as the Eiffel Tower, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we all have more in common with the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Or the ruins of the Colosseum.
But now imagine trying to build the Leaning Tower of Pisa taller, right? They're not doing that. They've been trying since, what is it, like the 12th century, just try to make it like stand still, right?
Yeah.
Enormous,
it's shifting. Let's move it back.
Yes, like enormous resources is being spent just keeping that structure kind of standing, right? But if you can do the nervous system work, that's the foundation.
Yeah.
If you can level the foundation, right? And then you can own who you are and own your purpose. Now you have a structure. Now you can build tall without
the wobble,
the strain. Yeah, and with the strain, because and I think that is because most people will never, as I said, never do the work. And you can't make someone do this work. But the price of not, like the cost of inaction, the cost of not doing that work, if you're planning to go tall, if you're trying to go far, if you're seeing a mission that is big and you're not doing that work, the strain on you, the strain on your nervous system, the strain on the people around you, right? Like some of the most well-known leaders in the world are also the most disconnected. And it's easy to say, yeah, they are this or that, right? Like, you should have more empathy. Yeah. And we should all have more empathy, right? And I feel that's a big part of what I get to do. I get to hold space for people in giving themselves more empathy. And now the heart opens and they can show others more empathy.
Yeah.
And they have more energy for forward momentum. Because they don't need to hold everything in, right?
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Well,
It's
and I
exhausting.
can feel the strain of the pizza analogy, because how much energy is spent keeping that broken system more or less upright. Let's call it, a little off centered. But if it was straight, that building stands, I'm going to borrow a word from your world, effortlessly, brick stacked upon brick, it holds the weight. Whereas just a little bit of shift and it doesn't. And I think,
Yeah.
I think the misconception, and I talk about the shadow work because I've been there, done that. I think a lot of people think it's, first of all, they don't know they can do it, and then they can unleash the power of their nervous system. But if you think about it, the nervous system has kept us alive since we first came down from the trees in the savannah. It is the foundation.
I just had that conversation today with a client. We had to bring some stuff up to awareness. And I was like, yeah, your inner CEO is 6 years old.
And
That
highly unqualified.
Yes. Highly unqualified, right? And this is a brilliant person.
Yeah.
But there's just so much stuff that is conflicting and misaligned with what he is trying to do and create. And like the insight when that hit him, right? It was like, oh, I need some time to process this. Yes. But that's okay. We bring it to awareness.
Yeah.
Now we can process, then we can rewire. And when we do that, it's like we're aligning the nervous system, because that's the thing, right? A nervous system that is stressing out will hijack your brain. And now decision making becomes way more difficult. You get triggered, you get more easily manipulated, right? There are so many downsides to that, to the individual, not to mention family, staff, clients, the change they're trying to create.
Well, and I love that analogy, because when we're in that nervous state triggered, and again, I love thinking about the brain. Most of us overestimate how logical the human species is. And by the way, that's my Achilles heel, because I look at people and go, they're logical, and then I'm like, no, they're not. It's funny, because when I go into a room, it's like, oh my God, this is a room full of 6-year-olds. I need to speak to them that way. And I think the aha moment for me is, if I speak to people at that level, we connect deeper, and then we can get more progress. The other thing I'm going to suspect is an outcome of your work is, when we're in that triggered state, we see one or two options and we get tunnel vision. Whereas I know for me, when I do the work, my vision opens up and I have thousands of options, not one.
Yeah, because we feel pressured, right? And also physically, blood leaves the brain and goes into our arms and legs and feet, right? For the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So you do lose intelligence in your brain. Like you become dumber.
Well, it's funny, Monica, because I realized that most employee onboarding is doomed to fail because we're speaking to the adult in front of us and we're not recognizing that that person, the blood is in their body and they're literally ready to run out of the building. And until we address that, no real training or onboarding can take place.
Or imagine decision making in the C-suite room.
Yeah.
Right? Yay.
It's funny because literally we end up with 4 options. We got fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And by the way, I love fawn as a new addition to that little family. But we think we're discussing big picture strategy, but our little lizard brains are going, no, 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 we got 4 options. Which one are we going to pick? And I've been watching other people to recognize which is their default, because that's how I know I overstepped and I need to reel it back. But one of the things I think I'm seeing when people don't do this work is there's a lot of shame and blame that leads to addictions and things like that. But the hidden cost of not doing the work in my world is the self-sabotage. We build the tower and then we blow it up because it wasn't tall enough. A lot of pain and suffering comes from not getting into the nervous system.
Yes, and that's one of those things that we don't talk about, right? The most powerful people on the planet, and I'm not necessarily talking about power as we see it in media, but like power energetically, intellectually, the ability to lead by inspiring and motivating people. Those people that have power of word, that can become thought leaders, that can be change makers, they have a really big energy.
Yeah.
It's the same energy. It can be used for progress, evolution. It can be used for self-sabotage. They have the biggest capacity for self-sabotage.
Yep.
And we need to own that. Like if I am going to own that, I can inspire, I can lead, I can motivate, I also need to acknowledge, I can also massively self-sabotage. I also have the capacity for manipulating people. I need to take responsibility for that. And for me, that is a part of the radical responsibility, right? It's not like everyone should take radical responsibility. I need to take the responsibility for who I am, the qualities that I have, both the things that I want the world to see, but also the parts of me that I go like, oh, I hope no one sees what's up with me, right?
I love that. And honestly, that's I look at radical responsibility as an internal thing. It would be nice if more people did the work and saw it, but at the end of the day, I can only control mine. And it's funny because I look at history and I'm pretty sure that both sides of history, the good and the bad, were created by people with great energy. And I think the difference was the people who made positive history focused on that energy. The people who made the negative news didn't do the work, and they were actually self-sabotaging, which, because of their energy levels, caused a bigger effect.
Or the winning side defined what was good history.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
So what is good and what is bad is often defined by who is in power at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and history was written by humans, so there's a bias there.
Yeah. So like the only thing you can really control is yourself and your own energy.
Yeah.
We can't. Yeah, like going backwards isn't really an option in time or in ourselves.
Very true. And by the way, I think a lot of suffering is created. A friend of mine refers to the brain as a time machine because we either go backwards in time or forwards. I try as much as possible to stay in the present. Now, I will say unequivocally, I know a lot of people that need to know you, need to meet you. How can people, if they watch this far, how can they connect with you? How can they learn more about what does working with Monica look like?
Mhm. I do have a link I want to give you. It is my website, Monica Bozinov slash monicabosnov.com/purpose quiz. Maybe we can send
Put
this
that
with
in the
the,
notes. Yeah.
yes. It's a quiz where you can explore your purpose. And by the way, purpose is not what you do, it's how you show up in the world. And that's one of those, I see that as the load bearing structure because that informs us, right? How do I run my business? What kind of business do I want to build? What kind of change do I want to achieve in my industry, in the world? It depends on who I am, because one of the biggest lies that we have been told is you can be anything you want to be, honey. Well, you can't if you don't have the nervous system for it.
Well, I think the saying is incomplete because it's you can be anything you want if you do the work.
And if you have the capacity for it, right?
Yeah.
Not everyone has the capacity. It's like when you see someone with a runner's body, right? You don't tell them, hey, you should start sumo wrestling. They don't have the
Exactly.
body for it. And we also, like the energy body, the nervous system, we have the anatomy is not the same for all of us. And we're being told, right, that this is what you need to be. This is what you need to look like, and this is how you need to spend your time. But maybe we don't have the capacity for that. So when you know your structure, your load-bearing structure, then that informs you of, okay, this is how I can do it. This is within my frame.
Yeah.
Now, how do I want to portray that and show that and give that to the world?
I love that. Well, and I will also connect people with you via LinkedIn. So, Monica, I want to thank you for hanging out with me. And you and I were seriously separated at birth or something. We were meant to connect. I'm grateful to Daniel Andrews for bringing us together. He
Yes.
did not exaggerate when he said you're one of his favorite humans. I second that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.